So could you tell me a little bit about project-based learning and like what it entails?
Project-based learning is a concept around allowing learning to take place in a structure where the students know the outcome and the purpose at the beginning. So generally projects start with an entry event that sets the context and the learning requirements for it. So students understand the connection to the learning as they're going, as opposed to learn it all now and then I'll tell you what to do with it. Starts out with, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to achieve. Now what do we need to do to reach that goal? It really developed out of the medical industry. If you think about doctors' rounds you see on television and stuff like that, they walk around and they talk about, okay, this is a patient, these are the symptoms, what are the possibilities? And that's where project-based started, and now it's developed into regular education, not just medical education. So that's really the design component around understanding the purpose of the learning before you start to engage in it.
So when you were like when you actually taught students, when you assigned projects, did you take into account the students having other classes where they also had to do projects, or did you just?
The only time I took that into account was to finalize the final dates of that project, the culminating event component of it. I looked at, okay, what else is going on in, like if I was doing 10th grade, what else is going on in 10th grade? So we're not stacking those on top of each other. Generally that only happens during finals weeks, which is just kind of the nature of finals week. But throughout the year I always looked at, okay, what's math, 2 doing at this point in time, what's going on in biology or chemistry at this point in time, to allow a little overlap there.
What were your influences on the due date? And
it really came down to, my interpretation of the amount of work that was needed. And also, when it comes to curriculum planning for classes, we plan out a year. We have a blueprint that this is all the information we need to cover. And we identify, I'm only gonna have so many time for this, like 4 weeks for this, maybe 2 weeks for this. So that dictates a lot of it because we're required to cover a certain amount of content. That, and then depending on what I'm looking at the culminating event, I may allow additional time for that. As an example, if I have a project where the end of it is going to be a video, I might allow some additional time based on, okay, they have to externally set up times to video, set up times to do interview, and then doing the editing thing, so I might add a couple of additional days around that. So it depends, A, on the project, B, on my calendaring for the entire year.
Okay, so when you were a student, I know project-based learning is a new thing, but when you were a student, would you appreciate it more as like, when you were a student, would you like project-based learning?
So first off, I'm still a student.
I'm
still in school right now. And I did projects when I was in high school. So when you say it's a new thing, it's not really a new thing. It may be new here, but project-based learning has been around since really the 50s. It's not to the extent it is now, but I remember very well doing videos and things in my high school classes, some of my high school classes that were set up around project-based learning. Now understand what you guys think about project-based learning is really the model that we've introduced you to. There's a lot of different models. Ours really came from New Tech Network because that's what we joined into. They all have similar structures to them, but they all vary a little bit. But I enjoyed project-based learning. Mainly for me, it was around the collaboration stuff that we got to do. Because a lot of times in school, it was, sit, do that individual work all by yourself, which in one way is nice because I control myself and my destiny, and working with others is hard. But society has moved more and more towards communal work in the professional environment. So I think that's another one of those pushes around project-based learning is students need more communal work as opposed to just community socially. Students are very good socially, a lot of them when it comes to getting together and hanging out, but coming together and working as a team to reach a goal is a skill set. It's one of those 21st century skills.
So, what am I gonna say? So, I read an article where a student who graduated from a project-based learning school said that it didn't really set them up for college, because in college it's all individual work. How do you feel, like, do you think it's true, or do you feel that in college it's mostly?
Part of that is the field you're going into.
Mhm.
Part of that is some schools. There are colleges totally project-based learning.
Yeah.
So, as you're doing your research on colleges and you're thinking about the occupation that you're looking at going to school for,
Mhm.
think about the skill sets of that occupation. If it's something that involves a lot of, communal work or project-based work, then probably looking at a college that has project-based in its foundation is the way to go. If you're looking at something where you're necessarily, let's say you're working in a lab and it's really just you doing your things and sharing out research or information, then what would be considered more like a traditional school, if you're working by yourself, is the way to go. But if you look at the business industry and you look at what they talk about,
Yeah.
most of those skill sets that they're talking about, you really see in project-based learning. Because we're at a point in our society now where school used to be about knowledge.
Yeah.
And knowledge is very, very important. But we're also at a point where knowledge is accessible almost instantaneously.
Mhm.
The issue now is how we are processing and what we're doing with that knowledge. So it's no longer just acquisition of, it's knowledge is available. Okay, how do we go in and use that knowledge and relate it to other knowledge, and what are we doing within our outcomes? And I think that's been kind of a shift in education, is not so much a focus on acquisition, but more of a focus on relating that information to other, and then implementation and achieving a goal.
Do you think there are any cons to project-based learning?
Oh yeah, there's pros and cons to everything, and a lot of it has to do with the individual learner, and sometimes it has to do with the environment in which that learning is going on. I mean, I've taught enough. I taught for 21 years, and I taught at this school for 7 years, and there's times where, a project doesn't work for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's the planning, sometimes it's the context, sometimes it's the kids. They don't see an interest, they don't see a buy-in, they don't see a relevancy. So there's always pros and cons to any type of learning.
Yeah.
It exists, and project-based learning is difficult for high schoolers and middle schoolers, because we do it in middle school as well. A lot of it is, I have to do all this work and I'm in a group, and maybe these kids are not engaged as much, so I'm taking on more and more work, and that's not fair. That's life, though. I mean, you'll find out when you get out into the workforce and you're working with somebody else, you'll find out is not everybody works at the same level and intensity you do. You take on the responsibilities you're willing to take on, and you blow off the ones you're willing to blow off. That comes down to personal.
All right, thank you.
Sure, my pleasure.